Welcome, everyone. We are delighted to have participants from many different places around the world, whether you're joining us live or watching us later on. And we thank you for being with us for another session of the Spiritism Talk series, promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation, held every Saturday at 11 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. It's my pleasure to host today's talk presented by Dan Assisi, who will be speaking on the topic Kardec's advice for the age of AI. So let's all give Dan a very warm welcome. But before we begin, allow me to briefly introduce him. Dan is an award-winning author and internationally celebrated speaker who has delivered hundreds of talks and conferences on spirituality in over 60 cities and on 4 continents. Known for a deep mix of deep thinking and witty humor, Dan takes a unique approach to spirituality that is steeped in reason to remind our audiences everywhere of our spiritual nature. Dr. Assisi is a founding member of the Spiritist Institute and of the California Spiritist Association. You can also find him as the host of the Spiritist Conversations podcast. Daniel holds a doctorate degree in education and a master's in public administration with a graduate certificate in public policy from the University of Southern California. Please feel free to send your questions at any time during the presentation using the chat window. Peter, Dan has set aside time at the end to address your comments and questions. And now, Dan Assisi.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you for that warm welcome. Hello, friends from everywhere, whether you're following us live or you're watching this afterwards. I'm excited to be here and just take a couple of minutes to talk with you today about AI. AI from a Spiritist perspective, or should I say, what kind of sage advice could Kardec give us for the world of AI? So today we hope to talk for a little bit, maybe 20, 30 minutes, depends on how excited I get about this or if I go down a rabbit hole. And then if you are around, feel free to pop questions into the chat or whichever channel you're watching, and we'll try to get to it. But my desire here today is just to really, really think about AI in this modern era, because I think we're all struggling with it in one way or another. Right? I think that we all know very well that AI has been taking a big piece of our mind share these days. We have these invisible voices coming from the machine, promising us knowledge and wisdom. And these are things that are not really foreign to us Spiritists, because if you think about this, we have been dealing with this promise of having this knowledge coming from a place that you cannot see and trying to figure out what do we do with it. And so what we want to do today for a little bit is to talk about this and see if there are wisdom, if there are guidelines that we can then come and bring from the past to help us with our modern lives. Because after all, AI has been bringing us quite a bit of challenges these days in terms of what do we make of it? How is our emotional state when we have to think about it? Some people think that this is, in fact, a big savior. And some other people think that perhaps this is the end of civilization. And I think that is, a pretty apt descriptor of what our society feels like today when we tackle this topic. And these same kind of sentiments, the same kind of thinking were also prevalent in Kardec's time in the 1850s, when all of a sudden we had this news that these voices from the beyond were bringing us information. Some people thought it was the end of the world. Some people thought that it would propel humanity forward in great strides. And so what you have here today is exactly that. It's this idea that you could go either way. And so what we're hoping that will take place in our conversation, it's just some analysis about all of this so that we can kind of figure it out. What is it that we could do in our daily lives to make things better? And to begin and to illustrate the process, I just want to give you a little bit of an example of this wisdom that these great voices from the unknown, from the invisible, are bringing us. So let me tell you a little bit about an interesting case for us to start and illustrate our thinking. Let's go back to 2023. We're in New York, and there is a lawyer called Stephen Schwartz. He has 30 years at the bar, so he's not an unexperienced lawyer. He is working on a brief for personal injury for his client, Mata, who is going after Avianca, the airline, for other reasons that right now it doesn't really matter. But the lawyer has a brief to write, and he goes into ChatGPT, asks a couple of questions, and ChatGPT gives him 6 cases that he could use on his lawsuit. It has citations, it has strong language, the tone is authoritative, everything sounds great. He goes ahead and he uses that source and put it into his documents. And you can probably imagine how wonderful this is. In a matter of minutes or perhaps an hour, he has been able to create this brief that otherwise would have taken him many, many hours of research to finding previous cases, to find all those citations and put them together in a format that he can present. And he does a really great job here, because what he does too is he actually, being experienced and being a lawyer of 30 years at the bar, he actually asks ChatGPT, can you make sure you check those citations? Can you make sure that that credit holds? Because he's doing a great job. And what happens? Well, I think you might have guessed by now. None of it was true. It turns out that ChatGPT made up those 6 cases and citations. And even when it was asked to check on it, it said, yeah, no, that's good. You can use it, right? So this was what we call, oftentimes in the AI world, a hallucination, because ChatGPT didn't have the information or couldn't have the information. It just created the information. And so, as you might imagine, this was a fascinating situation, because once the judge and the opposing lawyers began to do some research into those 6 cases, they quickly found out that none of it was true. They were perplexed. And eventually, the judge in the court in New York in June 2023 fines the lawyer, $5,000 sanction, and telling, you can use AI for sure, but you are responsible, especially as a lawyer, for the outcomes it produces and for the content it produces. And so that's an interesting piece there for us to consider for a second, because for a brief moment that day, what we had was AI working as a spiritual mentor for the lawyer, right? Schwartz at that point was so excited about the information that he had gotten, because it saved him so much time and it seems so wise that it almost feels like ChatGPT in that point in time was like a spiritual mentor bringing him great information. But we also know that it could also have been what we affectionately call an obsessor, just providing him information that it was not great and just trying to really make our lives different. Of course, when it comes to AI systems, we're not talking about enlightenment here. These systems, they are not enlightened. They are not aware yet, at least, right? Which means that they didn't do these things on purpose. Much different than perhaps human intelligences and spirits. But there is a parallel that we can draw here about how do we take that information in and what exactly we do with it, and also how it affects us. So in many different ways, one of my worries these days is that we are so excited about this technology, and rightfully so, that we think that all of a sudden everything that comes out of these machines, of these prompts, of these AIs, they are right. They are spiritually correct or factually correct, and we don't need to do anything, and they will solve all our problems. And there is a big challenge for us thinking about it that way, isn't it? Because what if it isn't? What if they don't have all the information? Should we just surrender our judgment to them? Are we responsible for it? Who's responsible for it? What do we do? And our tendency would be just to go there and find all those pearls of wisdom, right? So, in many different ways, what is happening today is what happened in the beginning of our learning on how to deal with spirit communication, no matter the time. So, what I'm saying here, friends, is we're really here at the same trap, right? Like we have two different worlds, but they have the same trap. When we spiritists are at the mediumship table, we get these wonderful messages that came from the spirit world. And we sometimes, if we are not careful, we just think that the messages are correct and wise because they came from the spirits. But not all spirits are wise, we know. And even if they are well-meaning, not all of them are knowledgeable. And these two things are not the same. So we got to pay attention to that. And so there is a parallel here, because when we are at our keyboard, when we have this information coming from this machine who gives us a bunch of new knowledge, it never tires. The answers come by quickly in convincing sentences. It feels like it is always the truth. And we're always asking ourselves, wow, where does it come from? But really, what the sage advice from Kardec that we can learn here and we can glean is, what is it actually saying and how do we use it? So perhaps there is a little bit of a hint there on how we can begin to think about our challenges of the day with dealing with information that comes from an unknown source, whether it be AI, whether it be the spirit world, and honestly, whether it comes from different humans too. The Kardec framework for thinking about how to consume information and make sense of it is highly transferable to any of these three scenarios: machine, human, or spirit. So what we could try to do is distill a little bit of that, the core of that, into ways that perhaps are useful to us. All of the things that I'm talking to you about here today about Kardec's perspective, they are a brief summary of a lot of the information that you will find in the Medium's book. The Medium's book is a wonderful publication, the first treatise that I know of that deals with mediumship in general and how to use it and how to make sense of the quality of communications between worlds. So in there are many pearls of wisdom that we can take that are practical in many ways to find out how do we filter information in our lives. So what I really want to talk to you about today is two different takes of how to look at this, right? And I call them the two challenges. And what do I mean by that? I mean, there are two challenges that we want to address. The first is the quality challenge. How do I judge what I am told, right? What information am I receiving, and is it sound, regardless of how it arrived? That is one of the challenges of the modern time. If we already struggled with typing a word into Google and getting 60,000 different sources and making sense of all that, now the challenge is slightly different with AI. We get one answer. It seems a lot easier, but the same perspective still applies. Is it true? How do we know? The second challenge that we also have to think about is what I call the influence challenge. What is it doing to me? When I am in the middle of this process, using these tools and digesting this information, how is that influencing me? How is that changing me? So it's all about permissiveness. What am I letting this system become in my life? And what does it do to my own judgment? Am I surrendering my judgment? Am I getting addicted to these easy solutions? What exactly is taking place there? And so I invite you to think about those two frames as we go through our conversation here today briefly, so that we can have some questions about things in general and maybe have a little bit of chat if you're up for it. But here we go. So we have two challenges at hand, and we want to tackle both of them. And I think that there is a lot of guidance that we can take from Kardec. And that's the beauty of it, right? We have old wisdom from the 1850s that is still applicable to our everyday challenges. So this guidance that we have in the Spirit's book and in the Medium's book, and that we get from Kardec and the good spirits that were compiled into what we call Spiritism, can also serve as guidance and counsel for us in the modern world, even though it took place in the 1850s. And I think that is also a little bit of a testimony on how robust and how coherent this body of knowledge that we call Spiritism is, because even though it's about 200 years old almost now, it still holds true in many different ways. And it's about not only giving us information, but teaching us how to get information and how to make sense of information. So let's lean into the guidance from Kardec from the earlier part, or I should say the later part of the 19th century, and see how we can use that in our lives. All right. So first one, the quality challenge, right? So let's go ahead and tackle that. So the quality challenge is an interesting piece. It's all about making sense of the content. And it's trickier than we imagine. First, it makes complete sense that we just say, oh, it's about quality. But it's also about getting ourselves out of the way so that we are not influenced by the environment and by the things around us to make sense of things. Put in a different way, we see Kardec here telling us in the Medium's book in item 256, for instance, that we must judge the communication, the quality of the communication, right, by its quality rather than by its name. If a bottle of wine is bad, the label will not make it any better, right? And I think that is a beautiful way of putting it in ways that we can understand. When a piece of information comes to us, we have to judge whether the content of the information is good. Much the same way when you open a bottle of wine, the only way for us to really find out the wine is good is by trying it and tasting it and see how it feels. It could be that the bottle of wine, even if it was very expensive, may have gone sour and is no longer good. So the label outside, it is no indication of whether the wine's actually going to be good, right? That sounds simplistic, but what we're saying here is the same thing. ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, whatever it is that you want to talk about, these are just labels on that bottle of wine. The information that's coming through them not necessarily will be validated just because it's coming from that label, from that AI system. The challenge is that we surrender a little bit of that judgment because we feel like, because it's coming from these systems, because it's coming from good spirits, because it's coming from spirits who pretend to be good spirits, it's necessarily good. And that's not always the case, right? So I think in that sense, we have a little bit of a warning to think about how to judge the quality of information. Kardec goes a great length of how to do it in many different ways, but I think we can test it, we can distill it, to use the wine analogy, down to three things that we want to ask ourselves about the information we are receiving, right? There's three tests for content. The first one is a test of coherence. Is it logical? The second one is a test of moral consequence. Is it good counsel? What are the implications? And the third one is it clear? Does it make sense? So once we keep those three things with us, hopefully it can help us make sense of what the communication that we're receiving is good or not, regardless of whether it comes from humans who are next to us that are trying to convince us or tell us about things, whether it comes from a machine, or whether it comes from the spiritual world, because we all know that the label is not enough justification for us to see the quality of the communication, much the same way that the label in a bottom wine is not a guarantee of the quality of the wine there is in there. So let's just go briefly through these three and see what we can think of and what kind of support we can find in Kardec's thinking to help us make sense of things. So, all right. So the coherence test, the first test, is it logical, right? This is the commonsensical piece that also is really hard, is, does this make sense, right? Kardec tells us in the Medium's book that any absence of logic, reason, and prudence can leave no doubt as to the spirit's origin, the source of the communication, right? So we can safely apply that to our AI systems this day by just saying, check it against what you already know. Do not surrender your judgment. Just think about it. Does this make sense? Does it contradict itself? Does it go back and forth? Right? You can ask it more than once. you can ask it twice. You can ask it in different ways, much the same way Kardec did, to see if you get different information, right? Is it logical? Does it really hold true? Shouldn't we ask that of also our own conversations with people when we're trying to make important decisions? Maybe, right? So when we receive a spirit communication, we say, does this make sense? When we receive a piece of advice from somebody we love, does this make sense? When we get and retrieve a piece of content from AI, we should also ask, does it make sense? The second piece here is, the second trial here is that of moral consequence. Is the piece of information that we had just received, whether it comes from the spirit world or an AI system, what will it do in terms of morality? Is it telling me to do something that makes sense to me, or is it just blaming other people or eliciting feelings in me that are not good? If there is a piece of information that is riling you up, that is pointing you towards a state of emotional being that is frustrating and agitated, perhaps we need to take a step back and think about this, right? Kardec tells us that good spirits teach us only what is good, which makes complete sense, right? So there is a filter of moral sentiment and purity that we need to put this information through. Is the outcome of this, from a moral perspective, something that will uplift us or will bring us down? Is it something that targets other people? Is it something that makes us feel not great about things? Is it something that really are going to be harmful to others? That is a filter that we should put through, in everything that we do. So the moral consequence filter is a second filter that we should apply to every communication. And to make things really simple, we can use a third one here too, which is it clear, right? So if something is good and is coherent and is also really well communicated, it should be easy to understand. So can we look at the message that we received, whether it's from the spirit world or the AI, and can we understand it clearly without a lot of doubt as to what it means? Because, as Kardec tells us, the art of saying much in a few words is a trait of the good spirits. And he warns us that the lesser spirits hide themselves behind the emptiness of their ideas and the pompous phrases. So what we're saying here is, if something is convoluted and jargony and really hard to dissect, we need to think about this and reframe it. It could be that it's somebody just trying to pull the proverbial wool over our eyes. And so we need to get to the meaning of it, to the sense of it. And it's important for us to distrust anything that tries to impress us by feeling like it's really learned and it's really complex and really wise. The really great trait that the spirits have, that, at the risk of being repetitive here, is to make important things and complex things clear. And so when we are dealing with people that are telling us a lot of things, when we're dealing with messages from the spirit world that are hard to understand, one of these tests are, can we make sense of it? Is it clear? If it's not, let's park it. Let's put it aside for the time being. It doesn't mean that we necessarily discredit it, but we should not take it for granted. And I think that is an important piece of these three tests that we should talk about in general. So 3 simple tests for us to be able to see where an information comes from in terms of quality. Is it logical? Right? It's the coherence test. Is it good counsel? That's the moral consequence test. And is it clear and easy to understand? That is the clarity test. Now, if we have those 3, right, to kind of make sense of the conversation and the quality of the communication, then we should also think about traps. Because I know AI and our artificial systems, they are not really intentionally evil. They are not trying to trip us, but they may just not have the information. And sometimes they are built in certain ways as to draw our engagement so that we pay attention and we use the system much the same way the spirits that sometimes want to take some of our time in our communications and our their mediumship meetings, and they just try to win us over. So there are 2 traps to watch for. that we also want to consider when we are evaluating information, right? And the two traps are the following. Trap number one is what I call the endearment trap. It's about winning you over and just flattering you so that you just like it and you surrender your judgment and your quality filter drops. The second one is the false authority challenge, which is it just tries to pretend it is someone or something that has a knowledge that it does not. So we got to watch for those two things in addition to those three positive filters. These two traps are important, and they bear us talking about them for a quick second. So the first one is the trap of endearment. It's when it tries to win you over. It's when it tries to praise you, stroke your ego or agree with you so that you're more likely to say, whoa, my God, this is good stuff. And this is also very normal in our level of evolutionary state, because we just feel flattered that people like us, that they think what we said was smart, and therefore they must naturally be good people, right? So Kardec tells us in the Medium's book that, evil spirits, that is spirits, when we say evil here, we mean misguided, right? Who don't have good intentions. The misguided spirits, often use exaggerated praise, and they seek to exalt the personal importance of those whom they want to win over. That is a tried and true technique of humans, to just flatter people, because once that ego is stroked, the question of quality stops being asked. I think we've all seen this. And for AI systems in particular, it's important for us to consider this because they are a little bit sycophantic. What do I mean by that? They are designed to please you and suck up to you because they want you to use the system. So you will often find that if you push back when AI gives you something, or say, but you sure about this? I don't think this is right. It will quickly draw back and say, oh, you're very right. I am sorry for that. I think your perspective is great. It will retool really quickly their argument because it has no feelings. It just wants to get you the information. And to be honest, some programmers and the do this kind of people deliberately do this because they don't want you to use another system. So they want to hold you inside that use case scenario. So if you push back or if you disagree, the system will quickly say, you are very right. And, oh, what a great idea. If you oftentimes ask it a question and say, well, what do you think about this? They'll say, this is a great idea, right? And it will start working on it because you told us so. It doesn't mean that your argument is good. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're right. It just means that they were built that way to hold your attention. The spirits also do this. If they want to get your attention, they will flatter you. It's a technique that works for some people more than others, right? And this also happens in your day-to-day life. If there's somebody who is sucking up to you, who is endearing themselves to you and flattering you, you should ask your question, why is this taking place? Is this a filter that I can really use and see whether the information that I'm dealing with is a good one? So be careful when everything is roses and when people are telling you you are the brightest spot in the universe. While you are an incredible and important part of the universe, you are not the brightest spot in the universe, because all of us are the brightest spot in the universe together. So we have to make sure that we're not taken by our praises and through our ego, right? What is the second trap then? There is another trap too that we also should think about. And it's very simple. We're trying to make this as simple as possible so that we can hold on to these concepts and apply them in our day-to-day lives. Well, the second trap that we also need to watch out for is the trap of false authority. It sounds certain. It gives us that information so easily, and it speaks in such a way that we just trust it because it has so much convictions, right? And so we all might have a friend who just, we ask them a question and they just tell us with such a conviction. You're like, oh, that person must really know, right? But just because they answer it very convincingly, they're fluent in that, and they can cite things, it doesn't mean they are right. We just talked about the case of the lawyer in New York, right? And so that's a good example. He went to ChatGPT. ChatGPT gave very convincing tests, very convincing legal language, but it was all made up. So we have to pay attention to the authority piece, right? Is it doing invented facts? Is it using fake names? Is it sending us wrong data? AI systems might not do that on purpose. They might just not have the information that we want, and they want to please us and address our desires so well that they make stuff up. And we also see that, funny enough, with spirits of the spirit realm. Sometimes we have spirits who really want to help. They don't have the capacity to, but they make stuff up to try to help because they want to be helpful and they want to please us. And in our day-to-day lives, we might have friends who do that too, or or family members who just don't have that authority. They don't have that knowledge, but they decide to give you advice anyways because they care about you. And if we just pay attention where that advice is coming from, we might be in trouble, because it's not about where it comes from. Again, it's the quality piece. It's what is the content of the advice. It's the wine argument again, right? It's not the label outside, but what's inside. So that is a way for us to think about the quality of a communication or a piece of information, right? We have 3 tests for content. Is it clear? Is it coherent? And is it good counsel? That is to say, is there clarity in there? Is there logic in there? And is it really thinking about moral consequences? And at the same time, we have to be careful not to fall on 2 traps: the flattery trap, the endearment trap, that is, and the false authority trap. These are 2 things that 5 things that if we pay attention to, it might help us figuring out the quality piece. Now, there is now a second part to this, which is also very interesting for us, which is the influence question. And what do I mean by that? Well, the influence part is about what is it doing to me? If question of challenge, the challenge of quality was about the external world and what's coming to me, one part that we should also think about is how is it affecting me? What are these messages? What are these systems doing to me? What am I taking in? What am I accepting? And how am I changing? And that's because Kardec has always spent quite a bit of time helping us reflect on ourselves and understand how we can improve from a physical and moral and evolutionary and intellectual perspective. So it's important for us to think about the quality of the information in the outside world, but also think about what is it that it's happening to us. And here I want to make a parallel. I want to invite us to take a little bit of a poetic license in a way and think about this differently. I want to make a parallel to Kardec's framework for what we call in Spiritism spiritual obsession, right? It's a poetic license, like I said, so it won't necessarily be directly fully related, but we can use the same framework to understand how these things affect us and what kind of influence they have on us. So as you might recall, Kardec describes to us the 3 degrees of obsession, right? And by obsession, he really characterizes the influence of a invisible force or consciousness, right? Whether you call it spirit, and here it would take the license for AI, and that we cannot break free. We can find this in the Medium's book on items 237 and 200 to 241. You should go over there and check this out. It's chapter 23. And he breaks it down into 3 different kinds of obsession: simple obsession, fascination, and subjugation, right? In simple obsession, according to Kardec, we are feeling the influence of the spirits, and it's there. In fascination, something else begins to happen, which is a little bit trickier, which is we lose the capacity to analyze things really well. And in subjugation, we lose the will to act. So we're going to talk a little bit about this in more detail now. But if we remember this in our minds, knowing that this does not necessarily go in order, you don't go from simple obsession to fascination and then to subjugation. Fascination and subjugation are 2 different parts, almost as if it's branching, right? So you go from a simple obsession and you could go either way. But it's good for us to keep that model, because I think that it tells us quite a bit about how we can assess the influence of these systems on us. And here's where I want us to take a quick second to just think about these things, right? So let's dive in very briefly on this. But if you are a Spiritist and you're familiar with this framework for us to kind of judge how we are being influenced by in the invisible world, it might come easier for you. And my hope is that you can transfer that into the AI world, into the human world as well, because obsession does not only happen between incarnates, us with a body, and discarnates, spirits without one. All right, so simple obsession, which really is, when we translate to AI, is when we are being influenced by the system, but we still have our guard up, right? In the Medium's book, Kardec says, since they are on the alert, they are rarely fooled. And that is great advice for us. If we are using these systems and understand that they may influence us, then we are in a good position to push back when we need to, right? Just like you said, the mediums know perfectly well that they're dealing with deceptive spirits. We also should keep our guard up when we're using this system, saying they may not always have all the information, and sometimes they may try to serve us information that is not completely correct, right? With AI, then it's the same thing. You still check. You still make sure that you catch errors, that you push back. You do not take his word as final, right? You may feel the pull of trusting all these things, but your guard is still up. So that is the state that we want to find ourselves when we're using these systems. Just being influenced, so to speak, but not necessarily going down a deeper rabbit hole. Now, when we talk about this other state, fascination, this is a much more serious place to do from a mental perspective, from a spiritual perspective, and this is where we want to spend some time. Fascination here is the failure of the quality challenge. As a matter of fact, Kardec tells us in the item 239 of the Medium's book that fascination is a delusion which paralyzes his or her capacity, the people who are being influenced, to judge the quality of the communications, right? Plainly put, fascinated mediums do not believe themselves to be deceived. And here is the challenge, as we have experienced that in the mediumistic field. When you are in this state of mind, you stop seeing the absurdity of things. You just think that everything that you're getting from the spiritual world, or the advice you're getting from people, or the ideas you have, they are infallible. They are not wrong. They cannot be wrong. They're obviously correct and obviously right. And despite what other people might tell you, you continue to go that way. You continue to use that information. You continue to heed that advice. That, in my opinion, and in Kardec's opinion, is probably the most dangerous state to be in when it comes to external influences, right? Even when it jumps out at the eyes of everyone else, we continue to do what we're doing. This blind confidence seems to be there, right? And this, in a way, is really what happened, right? With our lawyer in a previous example, he asked the question, he asked for it to double check itself. I mean, he asked the source to check its own source, which is never a good idea, right? You should always try to check your sources in different ways, much the way Kardec did in the 1850s when he was asking the spirits. He would go to one meeting, he would ask a question, then he'd go to another meeting looking for different sources and ask the same question, and then he would see what other people had asked in different meetings to see if the information he was attaining was indeed true. He had his filter up. He had his guard up. When we are in the fascination stage, we don't. We just accept what it is, and we just run with that. And that is really dangerous. So how are we taking all this information in? When we are taking information in, are we at least stopping to do the quality check, or are we so certain that it is correct that we don't even bother? If we find ourselves in the state of not even checking or even thinking we should check, maybe, just maybe, we're in a dangerous spot and should take a step back. So that is good advice that was given to us 875 years ago, and that to this day we can still use, regardless of whether it can be used in mediumistic communications and meetings or in our day-to-day life. Are you stopping to check? Are you questioning yourself? Right? The third case here that he puts to us over there, or I should say, the third state of mind that he brings to us over there too, is that of subjugation, which is nothing else but the failure of the will. If fascination is the inability to question the quality, here in subjugation, it's the failure of the will. What does that mean? That we're still aware, but we can't control ourselves, right? He defines it in the Medium's book as a constriction that causes its victim's will to become paralyzed, right? We know in the space that we are being controlled or influenced by outside forces. We just don't feel like we can do anything about it. It's just the way it is. Or even if we want to, but it's so much work. Clearly, I'm drawing a parallel here, right? But with AI, in this case, is when we just outsource everything to AI and we just let it do everything. We know that it can make mistakes. We know that it can do things it's not supposed to. This is the agentic way, right? We just have agents doing stuff for us. We know it's going to make mistakes. We know that it's not a good thing, but we just let it happen. So that is also a filter that we want to think about. Clearly, I am adapting slightly these three different things: simple obsession, fascination, and subjugation, to the AI context, so that we can audit ourselves and see how we are thinking about this. But I think that you can see the connection. I hope that you can see the connection between things. It's important for us to check ourselves on that too, right? And my point here, at the end of the day, my friends, is that even the most refined, educated, and otherwise intelligent individuals, as Kardec tells us, are not all exempt from this influence, right? And he says that to people that are really smart. Even smart and prepared people can't fall trap to all these things. And it's important for us to be aware of these things, right? Because at the end of the day, there's another great piece of advice that he brings to us here, is that the remedy to this, the fix to this, is not to abandon the tool. It's not to say, I'm never going to use AI. It's not to not engage in mediumistic communications, right? The goal is to bring our guard back up so that we can make the best decisions we can and learn to discern along the way, right? He says to regress our obsession, or the degree of our influence, to the degree of simple obsession. To just go back to just merely being influenced, but still retain full possession of our will and our judgment. That is great advice for us, because we also know we're not perfect. That means we are going to make mistakes. So there are no point in us beating ourselves upside the head because we made a mistake. We just have to be on the lookout for them and correct them when they come, because they're going to happen, right? So at the end of the day, what we really want to talk about is to make sure that we are developing the habits and the skills and the practice to have this discernment going up. As a matter of fact, I think that his advice that he has given us 175 years ago is so great in many different ways that we should, bear to height. We should go back and maybe study a little bit about the Medium's book and detach its meaning just from mediumistic communications and bring it to our everyday life. Because these skills, these filters that he is giving us, are very important for us to discern the quality of information, right? He tells us, to kind of wrap things up here, the Medium's book, item 46, that God has given us reason and discernment for judging both spirits and humans, right? This ability that we're trying to develop as human beings of having critical thinking and discernment, it's something that happens in spirit communications, but also in our everyday interactions. And here's where I do my little ad here too. And also includes AI content. If Kardec were here today with us, writing to us in this time and age, he very well might have said an AI content too, because the spirit of it is making sense of communication, right? And in order to judge both spirits and individuals, we must first know how to judge ourselves. We have to be on the lookout, on the guard for how we are being influenced by this too. It's not just about the external pieces. It is not just about the quality of education, but what is it doing to us and how we can handle that, right? So those 5 tools that we were talking about on the quality of judgment, right? We want to make sure that we are always up and running, and logically speaking, and making sure that we're testing for quality. How do we do that? Is the message clear? Is it coherent? Is it logical, right? Number 2, and is it good advice? Does it do us good? That is great. 3 great checks that we can do. And also, we should be on the lookout for whether that information is trying to win us over emotionally. Is it trying to endear itself to us and flatter us so that we drop our critical thinking shields And is it bringing itself in a sense of false authority to intimidate us or to coerce us into accepting it? That's how we take a look at the quality piece. And on the influence question, we ought to ask ourselves, hey, what kind of influence am I having or over me here on this? Am I just being mildly influenced? Am I so down the rabbit hole that I'm not even thinking about whether I'm influenced and I'm just accepting everything that comes at me and I cannot possibly see that? Of course, if you're in that state, that is really hard to get out of the state. But it's good to not to get there to begin with. But am I so fascinated by this information that I cannot accept that it might fall? Or am I in a place where I know that it could, make a mistake, but it's so convenient, it's so easy, I'm just going to keep doing it because I have a little bit of a attitude of let it ride, right? So that's something that we should always talk about and think about when it comes to ourselves. To wrap things up then, what can you take with you, right? I think that if we're talking about the quality challenge that is about the outside world and dealing with people, and we're talking about the influence challenge, which is about dealing with yourself, there are two sets of takeaways that we can take, especially if you want clear guidelines on how to deal with your AI system, right? You can actually change your state of mind, but you can actually train your AI too. So when you're talking to your AI, if you're giving it instructions, why don't you ask it not to flatter you, to tell you if you're wrong? Because AI has, some very little programming there to actually try to deceive you. It can follow directions. So flat out ask me. These are things that I have, for instance, in the AI tools that I have and the set of general guidance that every AI client has. You can tell things about yourself and how you want. And I say, don't flatter me. If I'm wrong, say so. Push back, right? Advise. Don't decide for me is a second one, because oftentimes these systems will make tons of decisions and assumptions for you. And I ask them, every time that you're going to make a decision, go ahead and call it out for me so that I know that you're making a decision, right? The third piece of advice that you can ask them and ask people in general is, hey, it's okay for you to say, I don't know, instead of trying to guess. If you don't have the information, tell me you don't have enough information. You cannot make a strong connection. The fourth one is, hey, let me know of anything that you're not sure and that you might just be inventing. And the last one is, give me the source that I can't verify. And ask that multiple times, because if you're not careful, you may find yourself in the same spot of the lawyer in New York, Schwartz, in 2023, that got himself into trouble by using information that it was not true. And the judge that actually caught that, besides fining him and, obviously give him a little bit of his mind, also told him that he should have, that the Schwartz, a lawyer, had to write a letter to all the real judges that ChatGPT said had all these precedents, right? That were all made up. Schwartz had to write a real letter to them apologizing for using their name in something that it was not true, because using that fake information, he was actually involving the credibility of real people that had nothing to do with it. So that thought was interesting too. So there you go. For your AI perspective, you can do this. Make sure that you're not flattered. Make sure that you're in advice mode. Make sure that you call out, when you don't know. Flag things that might be not sturdy, and make sure you check your sources. Have your AI do that with you, right? And the other side, when we talk about the influence challenge, here are things when you turn inwards, and you should ask yourself, when I'm interacting with people in these systems, when did I last catch a mistake? Am I really thinking about this? When did I last disagree with this? Do I have feelings about this, or I'm just accepting everything it is? What do I think, right? And if you also want to check to make sure you're not overly dependent on this, could I still do these tasks without it, right? Am I just cognitive offloading things to the system? And I'm just saying, yeah, do this, but I don't even know what's happening. I don't even know what's doing. If you don't understand it, and if you can't do it, at least, more slowly, then there's something that we need to think about in the use of these systems. It might just checking things or accepting things, right? So there you go, right? One big piece here of things that we need to talk about is that Kardec is very adamant that no formula replaces your own judgment, right? And I know that I'm giving you some structure here, but deviate from that structure and think for yourself, because it is your discernment, it is your thinking that is going to really figure things out. And if I were to sum things up as an advice for our age here nowadays, is our evolution is not automated. You cannot go into automatic pilot to become a better person. You cannot go into an automatic pilot when you're using these systems that give you knowledge. You have to be there, right? Kardec told us, good spirits allow the best mediums to be deceived sometimes so that they can exercise their judgment and learn to discern truth from falsehood. We too need to learn to discern truth from falsehood. So all these challenges we're having and all these troubles we are going to have with AI are also divine providence at work, letting us have the opportunity to learn how to discern. Discernment, critical thinking is the work. We need to have the opportunities to differentiate between what's right or what's wrong for us, their implications, and we will only learn that if we are engaged with challenges that push us forward. So make sure that you're exercising your discernment and that you're really working on growing those skills that are innate to you, using this framework, using any other framework, so that you're not caught in a place where you are putting forth things that are not true, that are harmful to you and others, or you're just simply accepting everything that comes your way. Because if that's happening, then you're not in a good place, right? So Kardec has given us advice from 170 years ago on how to judge the quality of spirit communication and communication with humans. It is up to us now to go back to that book if we want to reflect on this and apply this to our everyday life. And I think it's brilliant. It's brilliant that we have this framework that teaches us how to do this. It's no surprise that, as a matter of fact, the whole of Spiritism has been developed on top of this idea of discernment. Initially, Kardec's discernment of making information, making sense of information that comes from the spirit world, but later from others who also showed a great degree of discernment to grow that knowledge and grow themselves in the process. Now it's our turn. So let's make sure we make the best use of the tools we have, including artificial intelligence, but still be on the driving side of things and making sure that we are thoughtful of the clarity of our content, the logic and reason of our content, its moral consequences, make sure that we are not being trapped by pleasantries, that we are not accepting false authority when it comes to knowledge and wisdom, and that we are really being thoughtful of how all these things are influencing us, whether they're just a mild influence that we should deal with, whether we're a little bit in denial of our dependency on these tools, or if we just really are taking a lazy approach to things and letting ride that we're not thinking about things. Our evolution is not automated. Discernment is the work, and I hope that this helps you a little bit think about your systems and maybe whet your curiosity to go back and read this wonderful book, The Medium's Book too. And I'll stop there because I've talked a lot. So thank you for your attention today. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you very, very much, Dan, for sharing your fascinating and insightful reflections with us today. Everyone, please stay with us for the Q&A session, which will begin shortly after just a few announcements. Please register now for the 20th U.S. Spiritist Symposium hosted by the United States Spiritist Federation. The event will take place on November 7th at the AC Hotel, Fort Lauderdale Airport in Dania Beach, Florida. This year's theme is The Compass for Spiritual Progress. For registration and more information about the talks and speakers, please visit spiritistsymposium.org. And next, we cordially invite you to the 19th Spiritist Conference of Georgia on October 10th and 11th. This year's theme is The Spiritist View of Afflictions. Lectures will be in English and in Portuguese with simultaneous interpretation. A discounted registration will be offered through August 31st. Visit spiritistconference.com or use the displayed QR code for details and registrations. And we always invite all of you to follow us on our social media channels to stay updated on upcoming events and activities. And please don't forget to visit the United States Spiritist Federation bookstore at spiritistbooks.us, where you will find a wide and wonderful selection of Spiritist books and several exciting new releases. And if you work with Spiritist youth or are interested in educational resources, be certain to explore the Family, Youth, and Children Spiritist Education FYCSE website at spiritismkids.us, where you'll discover excellent materials and ideas for youth educators. And please take a few moments to check out the Be My Hope app, which offers inspiring daily messages to uplift your spirit. It's very, very helpful, and it's available for free on both the App Store and Google Play. So let's now turn our attention to your comments and questions. There's still time to send yours in, so please feel free to share your thoughts. And let's see what our first one will be. How do we guide our children in the use of technology while maintaining our moral compass?
Aha, the great question over time, right? I think that is a wonderful question, because the way we guide our children is not really that different from the way we should guide ourselves. We should have them go through this test, right? Hey, do we understand that technology is not just a tool for consumption of information? It's also a tool for learning, but production of things. So are we overly dependent on technology? Are we just taking things in? We could use the same framework that we talked about spiritual obsession, right? To think about this. Our children so dependent on it that they can no longer have their own judgment, then that's not a good thing. If they're surrendering their judgment to the tools, that's not a good thing either, right? So we have to have a conversation with our children why the tools are there and what is their purpose. It is very tempting, just like it is for us, to just sit in front of these tools and consume things, right? We all know about the way that they act in our brain when it comes to social media, for instance, how it affects us, how it is good to get likes, and how is it good to feel like people care about us or that we are important. We want to be special. So it's important for us to have conversations with our children about all these things. I'll give you simple examples, for instance, when it comes to social media. You know, my kids like to watch YouTube quite a bit because that's what they do these days, right? So I watch with them. It's important for us to know what they're watching too. Sometimes I watch with them. And in many times, like, you know, there are product placements. They're no longer commercials. They don't stop the programming to tell you, buy this candy. Instead, they have these influencers, sometimes have their own candy brands, do fun things with it or say how wonderful it is. And because the kids are watching this, they are plugging away all these things. And then, you know, and you have to have a conversation with your children and say, do you know why they're saying that this candy is so good? Like, no, why? Because it's good. No, it's because they made the candy and they're selling it. So you have to understand that what's coming at you. And, you know, it's kind of like hidden in there and so forth. So it's important to have these conversations about why things are happening. With children, we want to develop their cognitive skills. We want to make sure that they are aware of what they are seeing and being able to judge why an information is brought forth. In that particular example of the candy, for instance, they are totally trying to get you into the, you know, the flattery and the endearment trap. They try to make something nice so that you like them and you trust their judgment and you lower your quality check to see what's going on. Why are people presenting you? Why are they suggesting that candy and not another one? Why are they saying that you should buy this product versus that product? Because there is an interest here. And when you're able to put that check, right, that thing, what authority do they have? Are they experts in candy? No. Are they experts in toys? No. Are they perhaps motivated by their own personal gain? Yes. So maybe your filter goes up. It does not mean that you don't try that candy if you don't want to, that you don't buy the toy, but you should go wide-eyed into the decision, knowing why you're making that, right? And our children need to be taught that as well. And we do that by modeling. We should walk with them and do this just the way we would do with other people and have conversations about this. So develop in them the ability to try to think for themselves as much as they can. Naturally, they're children, and their cognitive skills and their ability to do this is not potentially as high as ours, But if we do this a couple of times, it becomes a framework in which they operate. It becomes a method in which they start thinking about this. And then we can have more serious conversations about, why do you think it is so good to get a like, right, on your social media post? Or what do you think that saying this to get attention from others on social media will do to the people who you're talking about, right? Is putting other people down a good thing? How would you feel if somebody did that to you on YouTube or whatever it is, right? On Instagram or TikTok. So we can have conversations about those same pieces on the framework that we're talking about. The moral consequences one is really big, right? So what does that mean if we do this? Is that the kind of thing that our family does? Is it putting other people down or spreading gospel? Are things that we really think are good? Is there a difference between doing it online and doing it in person? All these conversations have to come from the parents. We cannot outsource those conversations, my friends, to anybody else. We cannot outsource those to the school, and we cannot outsource that to the Spirit Center or to the church. Of course, we want the schools and our Spirit Centers to talk about our kids, but it is our responsibility to educate them. We are the first educator in our kids' lives. So we need to make sure that we are putting the time into it. If we are not putting the time into it, it's hard. I know. It's time consuming. I know. I would rather watch Netflix too than have those conversations. I get it, right? But here's the deal. If we're not doing those conversations, then we are on autopilot. Then we should evaluate ourselves on those criterias, right? And we are just in let it ride mode, right, of influence. And we're not really thinking about our role and being reflective about what makes us the people we are and the responsibilities and roles that we have. So if we're not doing that with our children, I don't think that we need to necessarily to know everything, right? But we can even call it out like the framework tells us, right? Kid, son, daughter, I don't have all the answers here. We should look at this together. Modeling that kind of questioning is already a great thing, because sometimes kids think that we know everything. And they have this impression that parents are perfect, and therefore they need to be perfect. So they don't know how to deal with failure or not knowing things, and they might make stuff up because they feel like they have to. Wouldn't be different than AI. Wouldn't be different than ourselves, right? So taking the time to assess ourselves and assess our kids and have conversations about what makes the information good information, and what is it that we should be on the lookout for to not be influenced by other people's agenda. It's part of the human experience. We should all be doing it. And we can say, and this is when I get off my soapbox, I'm just going to stay on it a little bit longer, is if we do more of this, maybe the world out there will be a little bit better than we have right now. I think we're lacking a little bit of that judgment that Kardec brings to us in our day-to-day world. So hopefully that's helpful.
Very good advice. Thank you, Don. And can you talk about the use of AI in spiritual transcommunication? Do you think this can pose a dangerous practice?
Oh, fascinating question for my namesake over here. So no doubt, AI is opening wonderful frontiers for us to do different things, right? Process information faster, see patterns where we can't, or will take us a lot longer time. So there's wonderful uses of AI, and we can go into the pyramid of use of AI the way I see it, right? But I think this question particularly is really interesting, is how can we use AI for spiritual transcommunication, right? Transcommunication, or sometimes, used as known as ITC2, right? Is the ability for us to use machines and technology to receive communications from the spirit world. So there's a lot of interesting research that takes place all over the world about this. Even Bruce Schwartz, for instance, in the labs of the University of Arizona, have done a lot of work. I'm actually writing a book. I'm finishing writing a book that also talks about transcommunication, about in addition to other scientific evidences of life after life, because I find it fascinating. So I think that there's definitely a place for instruments and technology to play a role in communicating with the world. As a matter of fact, Dr. Bruce Schwartz, for instance, is developing a project for a while now that they call the Soul Keyboard, which is a tool that would be able to sense the interaction of the spirits to electrical, very low level electrical communication, that will be sort of like a soul keyboard, like a big keyboard that the spirits will be able to type messages in that will be registered on a computer and thus communicate with us, bypassing the traditional medium, right, channel that we have. I think it's fascinating stuff. And I think it should definitely be explored. But and so I think AI in there will have potentially an opportunity for us to develop new designs for these things and to help us detect information. Other experiments, for instance, that were being done with transcommunication is they have kept a room really, really, really dark, like dark in scientific levels that we and I don't understand. And they would have special cameras that would register clarity within that room, right? So dots of light will show up that are so faint compared to what we know, but could be still registered by these machines. And where they showed up could also be a sense, kind of like a keyboard, like a ways of doing different things. So while AI might not help us communicate directly with spirits at this point in time, interpreting large amounts of information to see if the shifts in the clarity in the room were statistically significant, it's something that takes a lot of math and thinking. And AI, with its processing power, can help us detect that and change our perspective and the amounts of data that we have and go through very large data. So I think at first AI will be really interesting in helping us digest incredible amounts of information and see if there's relationship between things to such a level that we can say, aha, we have proof, or we have enough evidence to suggest that this effect or this phenomena that we're looking into really does happen, right? But I don't think, and I don't see how right now, how AI could actually bring us the wisdom of the spirits communicating with us, right? I think that would defeat a little bit of the purpose, as I see. I could be wrong. I'm open to being wrong, right? But I think the AI is a tool. It's not the end goal, right? So I think AI won't give us spirit communications. It can help us understand and perhaps analyze it. But the getting of information still requires that human experience piece. And here's something that if we didn't say explicitly, we should, right? Evolution, spiritual evolution, growth, development, it's about humans and how we feel and how we are influenced and how we influence the world. So all this technology is going to do wonderful things for us, but we cannot forget that the bottom line here is us and how we feel. This technology will make our lives easier, but it doesn't mean that we stop engaging with the world. If we're just using these technologies to do all our work for us and we stay home and we don't interact with people, we don't go do great things for the world, we're missing the opportunity that I think divinity is bringing to us to evolve and do things differently. 200, 300 years ago, we spent most of our days just thinking about what we were going to eat and preparing food. Advances in technology with the Industrial Revolution and so forth allowed us to produce things faster to such an extent that you and I today can go into our freezers at night, get a piece of food, put it in a microwave, and eat it in 2 or 3 minutes, right? Which means we have not had to deal with it for 4 or 5 hours, right? Which was a time to take a meal. That time has been regained so that we can do other things, other productive things. The trouble is that we're still struggling with that. Instead of using those 4 or 5 hours to do something that would uplift us, sometimes we choose to use those 4 or 5 hours to engage in things that are not healthy for us because our evolutionary process is still at such a level that we're not making all the great choices that we should. Nevertheless, it's important that we have that time so we practice these habits, that we practice this ability and this awareness of being who we are, immortal spirits on a wonderful journey that are exposed to an experience here on earth to give us the challenges and the opportunities for us to grow in understanding in the practice of love. So I say all of this because AI is going to potentiate this. It's going to make some of our work even easier, which means we'll have more time to do other things. The question is, what is it that we are going to do? And the last thing I would do on my AI soap opera here, soapbox here, is this. AI is going to be a big brain for us. It's going to do things for us, which means that it changes the skills that we are required. Before, we were so worried about having all the information and being the smartest person in the room. These skills are no longer needed because AI will be way smarter in terms of content than you. It will be able to fetch and analyze content faster than you. So what's left to us humans as we're using AI is to become even more human, is to work on how do we interact with others? How do we solve problems with humans? How do we troubleshoot? How do we relate? Because that's where we add value. That's something AI cannot do, is help other people through challenges and create a world in which everybody benefits from. So these are challenges at the moment. So I think that's going to be a wonderful thing. So AI for sure is going to help us with the spiritual understanding in terms of analyzing data, but the experience still has to be ours. If we don't have the experience, if we don't feel it, chances are we're not going to change ourselves.
Well stated. Well stated. Thank you. From Patricia Clark, thank you so much. In a world of so much fear right now about AI, the unknown, I don't share this fear, and it's wonderful to hear you talking about that. I always love to listen to you. Thank you.
Patricia, you're so kind. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this, right? And here it is, an example of technology allowing us to listen to each other and connect in a human level about things we think important. Clearly, we're biased, but we'll check our bias, right? But here we are. We're in different parts of the world listening to each other, right? So Brett and Daniel, who is behind the scenes here to helping us, they all the way in Maryland. I'm here in California, right? And so how wonderful it is that technology has made that human connection possible. We do this. It's not about the likes. It's not about how many people this will reach. I mean, it's nice if we think that it will reach a lot of people. But at the end of the day is, can we have wonderful experiences to know who we are and what we should do? And I think Patricia's point here is a really good one. There is so much fear right now about AI, about everything in the world. We are so worried about where this world is going to go. Wars, crisis, financial challenges, lack of respect from each other, all the humanity that we're talking about, right, that we want to rescue and double down on. And as we talk about all these technical things, it's important for us to go back to our basics, right? And our basics, as far as I'm concerned, is we are immortal spirits created by God. There is a God taking care of us. Yes, we have to take responsibility for our actions and make the best possible choices. But that also means that there is a far superior intelligence, far superior than any AI we can ever build, processing information at the highest speeds. All of that will never match the power of God who created all of this, because a creator is never surpassed by his creation, right? If there's God and the world is like this, then there's a purpose for us to learn all of this. Everything is going to be okay, because God is not going to give us a challenge that is beyond our ability. And God is only going to give us challenges to grow. If God gives us challenges that are beyond our abilities and put us in places that seem like it's to harm us or to hurt us, then that would not be a fair God, a good God. And God must be good by definition. Therefore, it follows that it's not that God is putting us in situations to be fearful or difficult and they have no solution. No, it's that our filter is wrong. We're looking at the situations that way, but that's not what they are, because God would never do that. Hence, we need to change the way we look at things. And that's why Spiritism is so wonderful. It teaches us that as immortal spirits, I'm just here on one incarnation. So this fear that I have is warranted. I should be on the lookout. I should be on with my guard up, but I also should have hope, because now I have these tools. Yes, a lot of things are going to change. A lot of people, honestly, are going to lose their jobs. We're going to have to reinvent a lot of things. But if we hold on to our humanity and are mindful of this, we can help people who are displaced. The question is, will we? Will we tap into our humanness, right? Our humanity, and be mindful of our neighbors while we do that? I think that is the challenge at the moment. I think that's what this technology is going to come to do. It's going to come to propel us forward. But on a roundabout way, it's going to ask us, how are we taking care of each other? How are we taking care of the people who are displaced by this technology? How are we really leveling things up? So yes to fear, yes to anxiety, but let's tone it down a little bit, and let's be hopeful, and let's be on lookout for each other, because it's not the government that's going to take care of us, or whatever government and other people, is us taking care of each other in the kindest and most helpful way. Let's be helpful. Let's not wait for a solution from the outside world. Let's make sure that our inside world's figured out, and let's be part of the solution for the outside world.
Truly well. And let's see. Is there a place for artificial intelligence in disseminating spiritism in the world?
Absolutely. Great question. Absolutely. There's a place for artificial intelligence in all kinds of ways. It can help us make sense of information. It can help us summarize information. Now, we can make, and as we've seen a couple already, right? AI bots, or I should say agents, who you can ask tons of questions about it. AI can also help you, create wonderful social media posts or even content, and it can be a help. But it should not be, I would say, the only thing we do or the main thing we do. AI is to help us grow and understand ourselves. So if we're hoping that it will do our job for us, then maybe we should rethink our role in all of this. If AI is disseminating stuff, what are we doing? Right? What is our responsibility? So I think AI can help us think about how we do it ourselves, can help us position, can produce materials, but let's not surrender the responsibility of putting forth good ideas, whether it's spiritism, kindness, or charity, whatever it is in the world. AI can do that for us. We have to do that ourselves. We got to put ourselves in there, right? Otherwise, Jesus could have sent somebody else to do the job. He brought himself down with all his wisdom, and he sent many messengers, but he came down in person to do it. It is the human piece that's really gonna get us there. It's the human connections with each other, how we treat each other, that may convince somebody to say, you know what? Brad is such a nice guy, and he was so helpful. I wonder what he thinks about this, and what is the spiritist thing that he does? What does that mean? I may be convinced by the examples I see more than the really wonderful talks or logical arguments he presents, right? Both are true and helpful, but let's not forget of the humanity of this. If we are trying to move forward a body of knowledge, it's about the growth of the human being. Presenting just with artificial videos and artificial reality might not be the best way. It doesn't mean that we don't do it, but it's not the sole most important thing. At least that's my take, right? If we're talking about personal development, I don't think a machine can help me do personal development. It can point me in the right direction, but it's not going to be my mentor or coach, right? So I need to kind of see and reevaluate that. But for sure, I use AI a lot. I love it. I build lots of things with AI. It saves me tons of time. It helps me reflect. And it definitely has a role in disseminating spiritism and any good practice out there. But humans are still what's going to make the difference. And I think that's important for us not to forget that.
Good thoughts. Very, very good thoughts. Thank you again very much, Dan. And a heartfelt thanks to everyone who joined us for today's live talk, as well as to those who regularly follow our weekly Spiritism Talk series. Your continued engagement is truly appreciated. So next Saturday, September 5th, we will not have the live talk due to the holiday weekend, but we do invite you to join us again on Saturday, September 12th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time for our next live session, when Yuri Castro will speak about materialism and spiritism. We really look forward to having you with us. Dan, before we close, would you please share your final remark and lead us in the closing prayer?
It will be my absolute pleasure. Thank you for the time. Thank you for your attention today. At the end of the day, I am struck by the beauty of divine love for us that has given us ways of thinking and tools, whether they are AI or the Spiritist codification, that can change the way we look at life and look at ourselves. Today, I hope that you seen some advice that we received from the good spirits 170 years ago on how to make sense of good information and how to think about how it influences, which all helps us in our personal development piece. Whether that is applied to spirit communication, whether that's applied to one-on-one communication, or how we interact with artificial intelligence and generative intelligence, all that stuff that's going to come in the future. There is a pattern here, which is developing our own innate skills of assessing information and deciding how to act on it. So I'm very grateful that we are giving these abstract tools to change our lives in meaningful ways. So stay hopeful, continue to practice your own peace, and we will be in a better place. And for that, I want to ask you to join us in prayer, in meditation, in awareness. Close your eyes if you want to, you don't have to, I will, so that we can connect with divinity, whatever we are, and feel loved and part of a bigger whole. Thank you so much, good spirits, God, our mentors and guides, who always shepherd us through difficult stages of our lives, whether individually or collectively. There's so much happening in the world today, and sometimes we struggle to make sense of it all. And our hearts leap a little bit, and we feel a little bit more anxious because we lose sight that God is in control, and that as immortal spirits, we have so much pulling for us. We have so many who are watching out for us, guiding us, helping us evolve and make better choices. So we ask not from freedom from challenges, but instead the strength to go through them with our best abilities in place so that we can grow our muscles of discernment and kindness and face all the challenges that are going to come our way in the best possible way, bringing enlightenment not only to ourselves, but those around us. Thank you for the chance to think about this, for giving us so many wonderful resources, such as the Medium's book, the Spirit's book, and other wonderful books that can help us think about our role in the world, who we are, where do we come from, where are we going, and how do we deal with the physical world. We're so grateful for all of this, and also very grateful for all our friends who are either watching here with us today or when they feel like it. Thank you, God, for all that we have and for this wonderful opportunity. So be it.